So warm welcome in the next 10 minutes.
We're on, aren't we?
Hey.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. John Summich. I'm trustee of Mautuku Link and originator of the Ark in the Park. With me are Gillian Wadham, who's the manager of the Ark in the Park, Auckland's largest volunteer conservation project going for 17 years on regional park land, and Lily van den Broek, who's the chair of Forest and Bird Waitakere, and Robert Wolfe, Pest Free Waitakere. And we're here also representing some of the groups listed on your screen up there. Te akina ngā manu ka ora te ngāhere, ke ora te ngāhere, ka ora te manu. This whakatauki was granted to the Ark in the Park at its inception in 2002. It says that if we look after the birds, then the forest will thrive. If the forest thrives, then so will the birds. But how well are we actually doing? In the early days, we were doing very well, 0 to 5% rat numbers, which are a good indicator that the birds can breed successfully. But in 2014, we had a mast year with lots of tree species fruiting heavily, leading to an explosion in rat numbers, followed by an explosion in stoats. Mast years will become more frequent as a result of global warming, and we're seeing another mast year this year. These are photos taken this year from Kakaako on the left and Rimu on the right. And rat numbers have been high since the last mast year in 2014. So even with best efforts, we're not getting on top of them. Our biodiversity and birds can't flourish with high rat and mustard numbers. On top of this, we have the kauri dieback disease, which means we need to reduce foot traffic in the forest to protect our kauri. Are we looking after our forest and our birds? How are we doing? And are we living up to the whakatauki?
To help answer that question, we can compare the Waitakere with the Hunua ranges. Both are large areas of forest on Auckland's outer edges, with predator control undertaken via community groups and staff. There is a key difference in the predator control methodology, that being the use of aerial 1080 at Hunua in 2015 and 2018. What benefits have those operations brought? Here you can see two equivalent graphs of rat numbers with the Hunua ranges on the top and the Ark results on the bottom. As you know, no aerial drops of any toxins have occurred in the Waitakere ranges. So at Ark in the Park, on the bottom graph, since the most recent mast year in 2014, rat numbers have stayed high. However, in the Hunua ranges, because rat numbers have remained below the crucial 5% since the 1080 operation, you can see the line there in September 2015 indicating when the first 1080 operation occurred and the corresponding very low rat numbers from there to date. So as a quick aside, 1080 operations in the Hunua ranges achieve not only very effective but very efficient predator control. For example, it takes 3 months to complete a ground-based baiting round at Ark in the Park, while it would take a helicopter 1 hour to deliver an aerial toxin over the same area of 2,270 hectares. So that was rats. Now the biodiversity response. Here is a comparison of numbers of Kakaako pairs with far greater increase in the Hunua ranges. The Hunua ranges are shown with the orange bars there. Of course, Kakaako are not the only birds flourishing and rats are not the only predators. However, data is kept most comprehensively for rats and Kakaako at both sites, so we can use these as indicators. And graphs tell a compelling story, but of course there are tangible impacts too, as seen here with Zella, a Waitakere Kakaako whose tail has been injured as a result of a run-in with a predator. She sadly abandoned her nest after this. So what can we do to achieve the same success as at the Hunua ranges?
The key difference in breeding success is the predator control method. We know the use of 1080 is an emotive and contentious issue, and we applaud the council and you as councillors for your bold decision to use it in the Hunua ranges. We here as community groups in the Waitakere ranges hope this vision and courage will extend our way, and therefore we're asking you this. to start the process of a feasibility study into the use of 1080 in selected parts of the Waitakere Ranges with the exclusion of populated areas for a first drop in 2021, followed by one in 2024. Forest and Bird is the largest independent conservation organisation in New Zealand, and we are willing to help and support Council with strong backing and advocacy. The combined branches of Forest and Bird in Auckland region have just under 6,000 members. The recent Forest and Bird donation drive was the most successful appeal ever, with the highest median donation amount. It was for 1080, indicating a strong support for all predator control tools. 25% of the donors are from the Auckland region. We're here on behalf of all the groups listed above who are in support of this feasibility study. And inspired by Predator-Free 2050 and Pest-Free Auckland, people are motivated to look after their environment. And they're motivated by seeing and hearing more birds in their backyards. Spillover from birds from Arkana Park has occurred to Bethel's and to Arataki, and most recently to Scenic Drive, where Kakaako are nesting on private property. This is the Ark Buffer Zone, where over 120 properties are actively involved with trapping and baiting. These birds create the opportunity for great stories, and a live encounter with a native feathered friend is the best engagement tool possible. This Facebook post reached over 33,000 people, and all the responses were like, love, or wow, as you can do the little clicking button, and there were no negative ones. So this is just one post of one Kakaako that reached that many people.
So we've spoken about the ecology and the increased engagement of the community with the ecology and the suggested solution to improve the ecosystem in the Waitakere Ranges. Other aspects to consider, of course, are that there are the communities along the coast of the Waitakere Ranges and other groups of dwellings, but there are still thousands of hectares of wilderness far from these dwellings. Precise exclusion zones are easily achieved with real-time GPS tracking of helicopter flights. Hunua supplies 60% of Auckland's water, yet after those drops, all the required testing came back with no traces of 1080 found. Of course, the same stringent measure would be applied in the Waitakere Ranges with flying exclusion zones and water testing. Dog walking is not allowed currently due to closures in the Waitakere Ranges forested areas. In the Hunua, consultation, information and supplying of muzzles was an important part of the operation to protect people's dogs. There's no recreational hunting in the Waitakere Ranges, removing this as a point of contention. Best practice uses a range of tools in rotation for predator control. Volunteer-based pest control will still continue to manage reinvasions. And iwi. Te Kaurāmaki of Mana Whenua over the Waitakere Ranges have confirmed their support of measures that best protect forest health and therefore support a feasibility study into the use of aerial 1080. So more frequent mast years, kauri dieback, current closure of the Waitakere Ranges. We believe this is the time for this work to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes.
Right, now I'm sure there will be a couple of questions. I guess thinking about it from Council's perspective, and this is not our time to debate this one way or the other, I think what we've heard from this incredibly well-respected group, and I think for those of us from the West, we can't state highly enough that these people represent the creme de la creme of our environmental groups, and we're really privileged to have you here. So when you speak, we need to listen. And I think what we're hearing really clearly is that we want to do more in the protection of the Waitakere Ranges to manage our pests and our biodiversity. And just having a look at, we're looking at a $311 million natural environment targeted rate. This is a big slug of money that we can actually make work for areas like the Waitakere Ranges. So I think this is the start of a discussion about better and ramped up pest management, and I think that's the critical discussion that we need to start with. How that manifests and what tools we investigate, I think will be up to us to see where we're going to go with that. So, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, and I feel like I'm speaking to environmental royalty here. I just wanted to ask a question because I know we've had this discussion before, and a lot of people would say, oh, well, why don't you just use different types of pesticides? You know, why don't you, if what you're using now isn't working, and you can see even before the track closures, things were getting difficult. What would you say to people around that, are there other methods other than 1080 that would be effective, or is it still that whole foot carrying, tramping through the forest, etc., and the number of volunteers?
Shall I start on this one? Yep. So that's a very good question, and best practice shows that a range of toxins should be used in rotation, and we are currently experimenting with that, and we have tried one other toxin, and a third toxin is now under use in trial. The problem with all of those other toxins is that they are far more labour intensive than our standard one, and they actually result in more foot traffic on the ground. So with any ground-based operation, we're managing the risk of kauri dieback, and that's only lifted with an aerial operation which provides relief for that time. And the other toxins, like I say, have their downsides, such as needing to put twice as much out, which is twice as labour intensive. With speaking for Ark in the Park here, we don't have the volunteer capacity to do that.
Thank you.
And I can also say that trapping is done for stoats and mustelids. We also have a trial area with some of those multi-kill traps, but those techniques on their own aren't sufficient, and the combined trapping and baiting we're doing, as you've seen there, is not holding. We were doing well in the early years. The last year came along, we both trap and we bait with conventional traps and baits, and that hasn't been sufficient.
The question was, so in terms of having the tracks closed, I know you're allowed to go along some, but you can't still access all of your area. What would be what's the trajectory if you can't get in there or we don't do anything in terms of not just with the pests or the danger to our native birds, but in terms of our fauna, our flora as well? I mean, I think we've talked about some of that, the effects on that if you just let things run rampant in terms of the pests.
So we would risk a decline in both the plant life and the wildlife, covering birds, lizards, frogs. We've the work that we do is not now holding the line in the way that it was, and any reduction in that work would be a severe risk to the gains that have been accumulated, especially for the species that have been reintroduced to the Waitakere ranges. We would be at risk of losing those for a second time.
Councillor, Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. Look, and I just want to acknowledge the presenters, but I got a question to you, Chair. Is that okay? Yeah. Look, the question is based on the presentation, and it was around Te Kaurawa Maki and a feasibility study around it. So where do we go with that in regards to the presentation? I just wanted to find out where the process would be.
Thanks, Councillor. In my head, listening to that and, listening to the wider issues underneath this, I think our next stage is to talk to the groups involved in the context of what else can we do. We've got a serious amount of money now with our environmental targeted rate. what can we do to really ramp up the opportunities provided by the closed parts of the Waitakere Ranges, and also work in partnership with our surrounding landowners to really build on that buffer zone, because part of our targeted rate is actually directed at community partnerships and community initiatives. So I think rather than making the work about simply a feasibility study into 1080, which for many of us, including this wonderful group and our staff who've been subjected to the death threats and everything else that goes with that, I think let's put the context of this around how do we ramp up what we're going to do, but not shy away from the fact that we need to look at all the tools in the toolbox and balance them up against each other. So that feels like the next step, Councillor. Comfortable? And including, of course, Te Kaurau Amaki. And last question, Councillor Hills.
And apologies, Madam Chair, it's just a quick comment, just to thank you. And I don't think we're the brave ones, it is the brave staff and contractors and volunteers who put up with the death threats and the slashed tyres and all the other stuff they've had to deal with during the 1080 discussion. And as you say, the evidence is there that it's saving our bird life and forest. But I also want to thank you for, it is not up to you guys, but all the work and advocacy you do as community groups, environmental groups, really helps the discussion, because people think, oh, big bad council, it must, but to have the backing of the environmental groups and the people who are out there doing the work on the ground, it actually backs up what we're trying to do, saving our birds. So thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. I've got two quick questions. I'm going to keep to a very quick timeline. We're actually finishing this meeting at 1:10 today, so just putting everyone on notice. If I do curtail the questions, it's because we will possibly lose a quorum after that. Councillor Clow.
Yeah, sorry for being late. I declare an interest as a member of Forest and Bird and Waitakere Ranges Protection Society. Two questions, as I'm supportive of this. In the area where the population lives, what would you propose we do there? Is that just an education campaign? That's my first question. The other one is, it's an impressive list of groups you've got there, but like all families, there seems to be usually a few black sheep. The Waitakere Ranges Protection Society, do they have a different view? They were not on the list.
Not all the groups had the time to bring this question back to their membership. So if they're not on the list, it doesn't mean they're against it. It's just they haven't had time to form their opinion yet, because it is a big question. Yes. We have had quite a lot of support of individuals from groups who said, you can put my name on there, but we didn't want to do that because we don't want to name individuals. Yep. But they were just not, sometimes the groups themselves, there's one group in specific that wasn't comfortable having their name on there, not because they're not supportive, but because they already had so much vandalism of their traps, they didn't want to risk more of that if this comes out in the open, because their traps are quite accessible. So that answers your second question. Yep. To answer your first one, I'm also a buffer zone coordinator for Bethel's and Scenic Drive, and we've got street coordinators there, and they do an amazing job in advocacy and education, because there's a lot of misinformation out there on a lot of predator control tools. People don't know the difference between a bait station and a trap, a toxin and a lure. As soon as you start having that conversation, well-informed, rational, and allying those fears with facts and a friendly face, it really helps. And that is, I think, what should be part of the feasibility study, to see what the best engagement tools are around properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm wondering, could you circulate your presentation? I think that the information around the comparative biodiversity of the two ranges is really powerful. I've been I'm from the south, so I mean I've been subject to some of the most appalling just the most rancid shit that gets fired at me because the 1080 drops in the Hunua Ranges. But your information is very compelling. And I think along with things like recreational hunting for possum eradication and things like that, that would be great. So, but also, Chair, I'm wondering if officers could provide some advice as to their understanding of the biodiversity rates in the two ranges, because I think it builds a very compelling argument. And I understand that the two ranges are different in terms of one's pretty closed and the other one's rather populated, but it does make for a pretty compelling argument that a different approach to pest eradication is something that needs to be explored. And so could I ask you, Chair, if that information could be got from staff, because I think that that should help to inform a future discussion on this issue.
And the PowerPoint is there for people to use. We also have a handout which we can give to staff later to circulate as well, if that's okay through the chair.
And we'll pop the presentation, make sure everyone's got access to that. Councillor Cooper will move the acknowledgement of the presentation. Who would like? Councillor Filipaina will second that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And thank you most warmly for the day-to-day work that you do. It's extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your